Tracy Crouch.
Thank you very much, Mr Twigg, and as always it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And before I start my contribution, may I refer members to my entry in the Register of Interests. I sit on the board of British Cycling Events, which is a subsidiary of British Cycling, and while there is no direct relevance to this debate, I thought it still best to refer to my entry in order to be safe. Mr Twigg, this is a debate inspired by a young constituent of mine, Harrison Craig. Harrison wrote to me last year with what I thought at the time to be a simple request to help him improve local mountain bike trails. His email read, and I quote, "I'm wondering whether you could help me with putting forward an idea to improve mountain bike trails in Medway, as there are no decent parks or trails that include jumps, berms and drops. As a teenager, I can't travel far on my own without it being very expensive, and even if I can get driven, some of the closest places are over an hour away. The Capstan trails, which Mr Twigg are in my constituency, are all right, but could use development and implement new features or possible new lines or areas. This is what I was wondering if you could help me with to see if this idea is possible, as it would give me and many other teens proper facilities to ride our bikes locally." Well, as an enthusiastic cyclist and one who always welcomes and applauds young people's contributions to local politics, I didn't actually think that this was an unreasonable ask. But it was an ask that came in just before the local elections. So I advised I would do some investigation and get back to him once the local political situation had settled down. It was really an excuse for me to jump on my gravel bike with Luke, who worked for British Cycling at the time, and Stuart Vans from Community Cycle Works, which is an incredible organisation that has done wonders with young cyclists in and around Snodland, a town within my constituency that had an issue with antisocial biking, which seems to have calmed thanks to a new pump track and Stuart's amazing energy to take kids out on trails. The three of us met at Capstan and headed out on the trails before venturing out into the wider Medway towns. It was fun, but the fact that I, a complete trail novice and on a gravel, not mountain bike, felt comfortable on the adventure perhaps made Harrison's point that they needed some improvement. I wrote to the council to make these points, and for once it wasn't about the money, as our Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner had given money to the council for exactly this kind of initiative. It took some months to get a reply, but eventually one was received that said, "Medway Council is not able to offer such an extent of land in our ownership in the area of Capstan that it would include the type of riding challenge with respect to both distance and gradient." The reply was helpful in that it did direct to other trails in Medway, but also sadly reinforced Harrison's point by continuing, and I quote, "I have been riding mountain bikes off-road for over 40 years all over the UK, so I speak with some experience of this matter. When I advanced my riding skills, I had to travel much further from home, either by taking my bike on the back of my car or planning a route from home that took in local bridleways, trails and roads over a much further distance, as I'd outgrown what was on offer on my doorstep." The reply was meant kindly, and the officer clearly wanted to highlight that his own experience and interest in this area had enabled him to respond intelligently. But as the Minister has visited Medway on many occasions, he will be aware of the deprivation in the towns, and so will appreciate for some the ability to advance their skills further afield is not possible. I am now looking at other areas that are near to where Harrison lives, but are not actually within the Medway local authority, and where the PCC's generous funding could be better used. While this is not within the Minister's remit, loving cycling, and with it the accessibility to good cycle trails, is why Harrison's tale inspires a discussion on the wider scheme of active travel. Of course I could wait.
Giving way. In Batley and Spen, we've got the amazing Spen Valley Greenway, which is a much-loved and very well-used part of the National Cycle Network. It's used by many groups, including the fantastic street bikes. The Greenway is run by Sustrans, who do an excellent job. But would you agree with me that what we really need is a national strategy for cycle trails, which enables them to reach their full potential?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, as I often do on many things, and I will come to that a bit later on in my speech. Of course.
Can I commend the Honourable Lady for Chatham and Aylesford for bringing forward, and commend her for all her endeavours and commitment to sport, and we all appreciate it very, very much. And I know the Honourable Lady has also been a guest at one of my Strangford dinners, and I'm very pleased to have her there as well. And she visited Cumber Rec women's football team. Just an example of the sport. Sorry, my question. Does the Honourable Member not agree that in our encouragement of cycling trails, and we have many in my constituency of Strangford, we are encouraging improved health, improved socialisation, improved understanding of our natural environment, and this is certainly worth all of the focus of this House and the funding that is required from this government?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly, and as someone who's a passionate advocate for the outdoors and all that it can bring, he will not be surprised to learn that I do think that cycling is just one part of that brings in that sort of kind of natural well-being. And it doesn't have to be cycling. It can be walking, it can be rambling, it can be climbing, it can be canoeing, all sorts of wonderful things. And in fact, the Honourable Gentleman will be aware that I'm hosting an event next week, along with the Honourable Lady, about bringing the outdoors to everyone. And cycling is just a very important part of that story. So, Mr. Twigg, the more I travel around on and off-road on my bike, the more I despair, to be honest. Now, I know the Minister and I share the desperate desire to get people out of their cars and onto bikes, and yet our roads and cycle lanes around my constituency and beyond are quite dangerous. I certainly wouldn't let my son on the road while riding his bike, and instead willingly accept the wrath of those that he navigates or negotiates on a path. And where cycle lanes do exist, they're often left unswept and covered in debris, meaning you have to cycle in the road. There are potholes that are not only damaging bicycles, but are frankly dangerous on many routes. And we have situations where, for example, Section 106 money has been offered to improve existing cycle routes, whether they're trails or lanes, which are pleasantly away from traffic, such as between Aylesford and Larkfield, but instead are being used to create cycle paths that share the road with enormous lorries and delivery trucks. Sustrans, which the Honourable Lady just mentioned, were kind enough to send me a note for this debate pointing out Route 17 in my constituency. Now, I know parts of that route very well and have, in fact, this morning invited them to cycle it with me, as I personally do not think it is a viable route, especially in the winter months. And then we have the situation regarding the most wonderful path between Aylesford and Maidstone, which I had the pleasure of opening in 2017. It was much loved and very well used. It was flat and perfect to teach little people how to ride a bike. Unfortunately, a small section of the Aylesford River path crumbled and part collapsed into the river at the beginning of lockdown. And ever since, I have, to the point of exasperation, constantly campaigned for it to be fixed. It is a regular grumble on the local residents' pages, and the Minister has unfortunately been the victim of my ear bending for this path to receive some funding. Not least because at one point it had several thousand users per month as the main off-road walk from Aylesford to Maidstone, and it feels like such a wasted resource for walkers, riders and runners alike. Any news on this today, Minister, would be very welcome. Now, the debate we had last week in the House, led by my honourable friend, the member for Copeland, which the Minister responded to and I contributed within, highlighted the health benefits of learning to cycle. Kent bikeability stats are woeful. Just 13% reached the required level against a target of 50%, which is well below the national target of 80%. Medway's is better at 47% against a target of 60%, but it can be much improved. And both appear to have had central government investment. So in coming to the end of the debate, it would be useful to know from the Minister what more he could do in Kent, in particular, to scale up its provision.
Of course. I'm grateful. And she refers to some statistics about provision in Kent. To get some good statistics on cycle trail provision in our constituencies, I think it's necessary to have some sort of consultation. Yesterday, a consultation opened on the Columpton and Tiverton local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which is very welcome. I encourage people to get involved in it. But does she also, like me, pay tribute to people in Sidmouth, in the East Devon constituency, who had a questionnaire from the Sidmouth cycling campaign and had over 185 responses?
Well, I do pay tribute to those people who've responded to the consultation. And actually, I was speaking to my honourable friend from East Devon about this issue last week. Because he wanted some advice around the issue of cycle trails. He's clearly very passionate about it and about providing cycle routes. And actually, I fondly recollected to him, and I will do so now today, that I recently did a charity ride the night from Windsor to Buckingham Palace and back. And the first people I met on that ride were a couple from Honiton. And so cycling is obviously something that is very important in Devon, and having the appropriate routes and trails, but ones that people want to be able to use rather than ones that are being provided by local authorities without any consultation is really important part of that. And you know, one of my frustrations is quite often planners, you know, put a line in and think that this is the appropriate route, but actually haven't had any engagement with people as to whether or not that is something that's going to be used. So I definitely welcome the consultation that people are having in his constituency and in the neighbourhood constituency of East Devon. So coming to the end of my debate, Mr Twigg, I think it would be really helpful if the Minister can outline what he thinks good provision for cycle paths and trails looks like, because there is no point learning to cycle if you then have nowhere safe to ride. Cycling is great for physical and mental health, but it's also good for the environment. Establishing a proper trail network benefits everyone. It does, however, require a proper strategy that connects transport and planning together. It's so infuriating, I just made the point, when you see cycle routes retrofitted to new developments as an afterthought. The Minister, with our shared love for the outdoors, would be perfect to lead a trail strategy, one that recognises the health, economic, tourism and environmental benefits of a safe network of trails. And finally, we have some inspirational elite riders who will hopefully dominate the Paris Olympics this summer. So what message does he have for local authorities to provide for youngsters like Harrison who wish to take their trail riding to the next level? Mr Twigg, I love my bikes. I have a special room for my bikes. I know I'm fortunate to have more than one, but I love the freedom cycling gives you on the road and off the road. It can take you into the fresh air, away from the trials and tribulations. It can forge new friendships, build resilience and tackle antisocial behaviour. The more we can do to open up provision for all levels, for all types of activities, the better. And I look forward to the Minister's response.
So this House has considered the provision of cycle trails. Minister.
Well, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Twigg, and I congratulate my honourable friend and fellow ardent cyclist for bringing forward a very, very important debate. And whilst I have a very good speech written by the department, I'm going to try and respond to the individual points that she makes. And I want to start, first and foremost, with the origin of this debate, which is Harrison. And I think the tale that she told of a young man getting in contact with a Member of Parliament in the probably slightly sceptical hope that he could make a difference to either get through to a Member of Parliament and then make a difference locally. And then clearly, by reason of that, here is this debate. And I hope I will be able to give some good news on a long-term basis for both Harrison and the wider Medway community that she is part of. That is a great story. It really is. And I, for one, want to put on record my personal thanks. And this is what, frankly, Parliament is all about. It's what representative democracy is all about. And I sincerely hope that Harrison contemplates not only winning future cycle competitions in a variety of ways, he obviously should run for local council, he obviously should be a Member of Parliament, and I look forward to welcoming him on the green benches and ultimately becoming Prime Minister in about 25 years' time. So that is the first point. The second is, I also must make a declaration as an ardent but slightly fat cyclist who has done everything from the Ride 100 to the Dunwich Dynamo and a variety of interesting cycle routes, including through most parts of Kent when I took the train down to Margate and then cycled all the way back to London along the coast on the amazing trails that Kent has. It is a fantastic opportunity, as she rightly identifies, to get out and about, get in the fresh air, try and fight the flab, get fitter, and do all the things that we want to do. And she's right to highlight that in Medway and Kent there are interesting differences in bikeability stats, and that is something that we would like to work upon. And I'll come to that in more detail, but a 13% in Kent and a 47%, which is not too bad, of Year 6 pupils reached is something that we would like to get bigger, and I would encourage the local authorities to get behind, quite frankly, what is a supportive scheme that is available. And one has to ask why local authorities are not fully behind those particular things. I make the point as well that it is absolutely the case that we should put on record the thanks to Luke and Stuart and the PCC for getting behind both the individual cycle trails and then putting forward the money locally to do the initiative, which sounds to me like an eminently sensible initiative. It is something to be...
Can I just interrupt this there, just to remind that he's supposed to be addressing the...
I do apologise, I was being far too focused on the member who brought the debate. That is a very good point. I apologise unreservedly for not addressing the House and speaking too much to the individual colleague. So, the reality is, as I say, we put on our record our thanks to the individuals who were involved. I want to try and go back to the cycling and walking investment strategy in 2017 and 2022 and the establishment of Active Travel England. And much as we spoke in the House last week when the Honourable Lady spoke in the active travel debate that we had in the main chamber when it was brought by my honourable friend from Copeland, we're on a journey in this country, without a shadow of a doubt. We look at the countries like Holland who have got state-of-the-art cycling infrastructure in a whole host of ways and have transformed their cities. But if you look at the way in which Holland was a number of decades ago, it looked exactly the same as the UK. It looked the same problems of trying to build infrastructure, segregated lanes, all the difficulty that takes. And with respect, the first and foremost thing is we have committed over £3 billion, which will be invested in active travel up to 2025 across the government. That includes money from the city regional sustainable transport settlements, the Levelling Up Fund. I should put on a declaration that I have a £9 million project in my constituency of Hexham. And there are also other opportunities with the local transport fund that was the money that was announced through the termination of the second leg of HS2 for Northern and Midland regions that was announced on Monday, with many billions of pounds going to local authorities up and down the country to ensure that they can drive forward infrastructure, which can include cycle trails. It can also include all manners of roads improvements as well. In terms of delivery, Active Travel England have been providing capital funding to local authorities for the delivery of active travel infrastructure through the Active Travel Fund. Since then, £515 million has been provided to local authorities for the development and construction of almost 1,000 permanent schemes, of which 299 have been delivered. We announced £200 million of capital funding in May of last year for walking and cycling schemes to improve road safety, ease congestion, and ultimately improve the health and well-being of millions of people who we want to choose active travel. Turning to specifically her constituency, that included £138,976 of dedicated capital funding from the fourth tranche of the Active Travel Fund within Chatham and Aylesford, which is being used to fund 2 school streets in the area, amongst other particular projects. There's more than £12 million of dedicated capital funding for active travel within Kent and Medway since 2020, over 4 tranches of the Active Travel Fund. And Kent and Medway, between themselves, have also received £1.3 million of revenue funding through the Capability Fund, and I'm pleased to say that both are in the process of developing authority-wide local cycling and walking infrastructure plans. In respect of the Aylesford River Path, which is something, it is fair to say that my honourable friend has been extremely assiduous, as I think how they describe it in the House of Commons, but frankly, standing up for her local community as a Member of Parliament, as we all should do. I'm aware that Kent County Council has been working with Active Travel England to undertake further design and assurance work to put the scheme forward under the Active Travel Fund 4 extension programme. I can confirm that I have approved as Minister ATE's recommendations for allocating funding through this programme, and whilst I cannot announce the funding for the scheme today, we expect to announce further capital and revenue funding allocations very shortly. When such a situation is made, I sincerely hope that I will be jumping on my bike and coming down to Aylesford, and we will be meeting my honourable friend and anyone else, and I will sincerely hope meeting Harrison, so that we can then take forward and formally announce the Aylesford River Path and the work that she has so assiduously sought.
Of course I will. I'm very grateful for giving way. When he makes that visit to Aylesford, will he also come to the west of the county of Kent and visit the Bedgebury Forest, where there is a much-used network of cycle trains, used indeed by my honourable friend as well as myself? He will enjoy that, but he'll also see that it's quite isolated from public transport from towns like Tunbridge Wells, and it may give him pause for thought as to how we can make these cycle trails accessible for people that live in towns and may not have access to cars to get them there.
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, I should say, makes a very serious and important point, which is, whilst I have the great honour and privilege of being requested to visit a whole host of cycle trails, whether it is in the Tunbridge Wells constituency, or whether it is in Batley and Spend, or whether it is in Strangford, all of which possess amazing countryside, all of which one would be very happy to do so, getting to and from these particular locations, where, particularly if you are either low income or a child, with all the complications that has, is not easy, bluntly. And that is something that we have to take on board. And there is a whole host of challenges that this government and future governments need to wrestle with, and do local authorities, to be perfectly fair. Now, some of that is funding, but there is also a need to have a different sort of vision about the community that you're looking after. And with respect, there are examples, are there not, of train companies who will not allow bicycles on trains. There are examples of bus companies who are reluctant to have bicycles on their buses. There are examples, I could go on. That sort of stuff has got to stop, frankly. And there is also a slight benefit, in my view, of when I took this brief on, I specifically campaigned to ensure that, yes, I'm looking after roads and I'm looking after buses, but I did make the very strong point that there was relatively little point for the active travel aspect not being integrated with those other parts of the portfolio. The beauty of that is, if one is having a conversation with local authorities, with bus companies, and trying to do things in a different way, you are trying to integrate active travel and accessible travel as well, so that this is a joined-up system, which, as any minister will know, and my honourable friends have been ministers and know the great joy of being a minister is amazing, but trying to be joined up in government is a holy grail that all of us aspire to and not always can be achieved. And getting different departments and different parts of an individual portfolio to talk to each other and integrate with each other is utterly key. So, yes, briefly.
I'm grateful to the Minister. Given that there are places where we do have good public transport links and we do have good rail services, such as in the Tiverton and Honiton constituency that I represent, does that suggest that perhaps the department would be more welcoming of constructing cycle trails around places like Tiverton Parkway, like the new railway station at Columpton, like Fennerton, Axminster, Honiton and Wimpole?
Minister.
Well, all I can say is, as he knows, this amazing government brought forward the new railway station at Columpton, and it is clearly the case that I want to try and see more people on a bike. I want to see more accessible travel. I want to see more active travel. And it is definitely the case that the best bit of that is, with respect to start with, is bikeability. I just want to talk about it very briefly because I think it does really matter. So government has given £21 million for bikeability, which has delivered almost 500,000 places, reaching 51% of Year 6 children in 60% of primary schools. However, I genuinely believe we can do a lot more, frankly, and local authorities really need to step up to the plate in respect of this, because it matters, because learning to cycle from a young age is a life skill. Aside from all the health benefits, aside from all of the independence it gives one, aside from the fact that from a cost of living point of view and longer term, it's so much cheaper. Gives great confidence in the individual and their capabilities and develops our children in a way which I think is game-changing. We will be investing a further £50 million on bikeability over the coming years, and this will deliver training of over 1 million more children. We believe we can get to 80% of Year 6 children to take part in an on-road cycle training before leaving primary school by 2025. I add the other point, which is kind of going to my honourable friend from Tunbridge Wells' point, which is, of course, teaching the kids in school how to ride a bike is great. But much as we discussed in the House in the debate last week on active travel, we also then need the local authorities to take their LC whips, to take their development funding and ensure it is easy for the kids then to actually cycle to school. That is the holy grail. With no disrespect to individual parents, we want them walking or cycling, their kids to be walking or cycling to their local school, which is why so many of us support, for example, the 20-mile-an-hour zones outside schools, which make total and obvious sense and which assist the way in which we can do ongoing cycling. I want to briefly touch on the National Cycle Network. I echo the support of my honourable friend for the National Cycle Network and the work of Sustrans. It is clearly a national asset with over 12,000 miles of signed paths and routes for walking, wheeling, cycling and exploring the outdoors. The Department has supported the upkeep of this national asset to the tune of £75 million. I take her point in respect of cycle trails. Clearly, this particular example that she has described has been funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner. We want to do more without a shadow of a doubt, and I am certainly keen to look at that, and I will be engaging with Active Travel England and Dally Williams and the team in York to see what it is that we can do more of. I was about to... yes, of course.
He's making really fantastic points about Sustrans and the amazing work they do, but can he commit to looking at the funding for Sustrans? They are a charity. Unfortunately, because of a lack of funding, we've lost our warden for the Spen Valley Greenway in my constituency, and he did a fantastic job of making people on the Greenway feel safe and also making sure it was a clean and tidy space for people to work. So could he look at Sustrans and the funding that's available to them?
Minister.
Well, I'm not going to get into funding decisions for charities on an ongoing basis. What I can say very strongly is, look, this government has backed active travelling and cycling to a degree that no other government has ever done before and is continuing to do so. In my respectful view, this House should welcome the journey that we are on. I look forward to coming to visit Aylesford in the near future. I want to finish by making the point again that we are only here because Harrison stuck his hand up and had the courage to do something that we wish everybody would do, write to their MP in a respectful, kind way, but also in a very constructive way. And I put due thanks of this House on the record for him. I commend my honourable friend's debate, and I look forward to driving forward greater cycling infrastructure in her part of the world.
The question is, this House has considered the provision of cycle trails. As many of that opinion say aye, or the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.